Lauretta Ngcobo is a writer, a feminist, an author, a politician, but most of all, she's been the most amazing mother to me.
I think Sister Lauretta is my hero because she did things her way.
Whatever she wanted, whether it was going to Fort Hare, when no one in her district had ever been to university.
She was always seeking to bring others along on this journey of hers, of finding her voice and making that voice count.
She went on to teach in the University of London. She took up women's issues. She did writing.
She would have been sad if people shied away from having their voices heard, because everybody has got a story to tell.
In Zulu, when we want to authenticate your origin, we ask a question, Iphi inkaba yakho? Where is your navel? My navel is just down there. What I write about are things that have happened, that I'm aware have happened. In recording my own reactions to them, I am also recording history. Although my great-grandmother was a poet, none of my family are poets. The only one who is poetic in her approach, I know she took it from my great-grandmother, is my sister.
Isiphiwo sikanakazi abantu sokuba poetic nokuba good in writing sasuka emncane, kanti ufuze ukhokho wethu, ngisho mina ukhokho wami uMamgidla wayethi-ke mangabe ezwa ubuhlungu bokwaliwa engasanakwa ile ndoda yayimlande ngaphesheya kothukela, ayibongele intombi yakhe yokuqala enesiphiwo sokubongela, athi qomisa amaqele nogikidi mhla usingaphi, basibeke ezicwayeni njengensonyama. Kakuyilutho kwenencumbeni, kuyinkukhu yodwa onengazinto. Kazi ngiyawuzibika kubani, ngiyawuzibika kungangaza kwabakacele.
We go into story to be changed by it. We go into story to be healed by it. We go into story to shift our thinking, our perspective of who we are. We never come out of story the same way.
My literary background, if I was to speak widely, was from the traditional stories that our parents taught us. As I later learned, the children I was teaching, if a child wasn't making much move in writing or things like that, I concentrated on the story side of things and found that they soon sharpened. Our minds are related to storytelling.
Inganekwane, intomi, dithumo, you know, those were used to educate children.
Stories were not just being told because you just want to tell a story. There was always a lesson embedded in there. Teaches you, yes, about your sense of identity, teaches you about your sense of belonging, and also the fact that you matter.
My parents, we were in the rural areas. They didn't have a big cupboard of books, but they had boxes of books. My sister and I, we realized that whenever our parents were talking and they didn't want us to hear what they were saying, they would speak in English. We began to see the connection between the box and the language they were using in the house. And we got interested ourselves. We began to read. We began to take a lot of interest in what was the written word and what secrets it could hold.
Ngoba ugogo wethu wafunda e-Inanda Seminary. Kuse uMrs Edwards, umuntu wokuqala waqala i-Inanda Seminary. Ugogo wafunda waze wafika ku-standard 2. Kangokuthi she would talk a lot of English, trying to jump over my head. Beautiful adjective of a quality thing.
Education was fundamental in my grandfather's family, and it became fundamental in my own family. When my mother met another teacher, she was already a teacher herself.
Wathi mawudadewethu epasuse 7 wamthatha wam-aplayela e-Inanda Seminary. Wathi sesenanda wasuka uMiss Blansam, a missionary lady eyayisenanda. wabhalela uma wathi ngicela ukumfundisa mina ngemali yami. Mina ngizobhadala yonke imali yesikole.
She was head prefect of the whole seminary. She was the head of the debate. We knew that Inanda was going to be number one because of Lauretta. English was her mother tongue.
And when I got to Fort Hare, I was so excited by the thinking. At the time, Fort Hare was really powerful. It got us all to open our eyes as to what we were doing and what was happening to us, what was happening to the country, what power we had to change things. Almost every night there was some association meeting. And I went and listened and just drank all this knowledge and this wisdom, this new insight. I got my political education at Fort Hare. Unfortunately, as a young student at Fort Hare, I was almost discouraged, in the art of writing, because at the time when I went to Fort Hare, there were only 38 girls at Fort Hare. And when I say 38, I mean from the whole country and all the African states. No matter how much effort you put into what you thought was right, the professors seemed a lot more interested in male students. This prepared me for a situation where I was discouraged from writing. I didn't think anybody really would be interested in hearing what I had to say.
When my mother left Fort Hare in 1953 and went on to do a diploma, she became more involved in the resistance of the apartheid regime. In 1956, she was one of the many women who marched to the Union buildings.
Our politics have always undermined women. We were really onlookers and the cheering party. It was not until about the mid-50s that women were, I will call it, assaulted by the government. They began to rethink the position of not giving women the passes. That's when women now began to meet. Although, I have written about the rural women who still surprise me to this day, how more or less on their own fought so hard against the passes in the rural areas throughout the late 50s.
Mum was raided when I was an infant by the police. I don't think they were even that clear about what specifically they were looking for, but I think Mum knew, and I think it was within hand. So she picked me up, took that document, shoved it into my nappy, hoping that I wouldn't do anything untoward. And then she pinched me. I began to cry. And then she was rocking me as they're looking all over for this information, but it was already sort of in safekeeping on my bottom.
The security forces came and were ready to arrest her. So she left South Africa in 1963 on the 22nd of May. She went into exile.
The reason why I came into exile was because I didn't want to leave my children and go to prison like my husband. The English climate provided me with the space to write. I had lived through South Africa through so much fear. England is just the right place for me. They leave me alone. When it's dark, I close the door and there's peace outside, it's quiet, and my children grow up inside. Ngagqiba okunye kwakupolitical ngagqiba phansi komthi ngaphuma ngahamba okunye ngangikushisa naseSwazini okunye ngakushisa naseZambia okunye ngakushisa ngize ngayoqala ukubhala into engangingayishisi noma ibheda kanjani ngoba eqaleni kwami ukubhala ngangibhala out of the heat from inside ngibhale kubeke lapha. Next time kuthi angibhale angizuxhuma lapha kade ngibhala khona Ngiqhuma lapho umqondo wami ubungise khona. Ngibhale futhi ngibhale kubushiye. So-ke, my first book, Cross of Gold, is a combination of a lot of writings that I did at a time when I couldn't accept that I could write a book. Incwadi yami mina ukuze iyofika ku-publisher, la ngimjwayele uMargaret Licham ngifike eNgilandi. And she was the only person that I talked about my book, about my writing. And then she says to me one day, Lauretta, I would like to see what you've written. I said, look, I can't give you what I've written because it doesn't make sense to anybody else, and so on and so forth and so on. I give it to her. After about 2 to 3 weeks, I get a letter from Longman. We've received your manuscript from Margaret Licham. And to my shock, I phone her, what have you gone and done? She laughs and she says, yes, I thought it was worth something, a good editor could put it together. So we started working on it.
Feminism is what I found in England. At first, it kind of jolted me. I was being attacked by feminists. Right through this book, women are not free. Feminists were not happy. The psyche in me told me that women could not go far. I've had a struggle, which fortunately the feminist experience in England helped me overcome.
So she was really, I think, acutely aware through her own experience of how Black women are made invisible as producers of knowledge. So she provides this platform with Let It Be Told. And that is what is so incredible about her, that she was a writer for other writers.
So I think that's something that a lot of the newer writers take for granted. They don't know the struggles that your mother had to go through. I was really very engaged by the fact that she had that anthology, Let It Be Told. That was showcasing Black British women writers in essays. So that was an important landmark to me. And the fact that your mother did that was an important indication of how she saw the importance of getting Black women's voices out there.
But there was a book that I'd always known I would write, a story of women who had brought me up. The story of my life, my childhood, of the life of migration, people leaving the rural areas to go and work in the cities. What life meant to me as a child in that rural part of South Africa. And that's why there's a lot of that in And They Didn't Die.
When we see, for example, a writer like Alan Paton, who writes about the same community in Cry the Beloved Country, he has one African woman, Ma Khumalo, and the only line he writes about her is she stood at the window with bovine eyes, mute with the suffering of oxen. That is African women in the imagination of a white liberal. That is the tradition that she enters into, Mrs. Noble, and writes these rich, fully agentic lives for these women. They are mothers, they are wives, they are sexual. In short, what she does is she confers full humanity and dignity to women who have been looked at as objects.
But I was not free myself at the time. Even while I wanted to write this book, even while I started to write this book, I think my own liberation came through this book.
you.